So when I went into 2024, I was not expecting it to turn into a Mindy McGinnis year, but it absolutely did. It absolutely did, and we have to talk about it. So hi everyone, I'm Natalie. I talk bookish, manga, and anime things here, and our focus for today is going to be Mindy McGinnis and how I quickly spiraled into becoming a fan of hers. So I feel like I'm definitely late to the party, because the heyday of Mindy McGinnis on booktube was for sure several years ago, but I hadn't gotten around to reading her stuff. I kept hearing about specifically the female of the species, and a couple of the booktubers I really enjoyed watching would bring her up as they kept reading her releases as they came out. But I kept being like, not yet, not yet, not yet. I don't know. It'll happen. I don't know when, but it'll happen. And it finally did. The way that it ended up happening was that at the end of July, I went to a book festival that happens in Illinois that's all around YA books. And I originally went with the intent of meeting and frankly only caring about the fact that Kay Ancrum was going to be there, because I had recently read Icarus, absolutely loved it, adored it, and I had read other works by Kay Ancrum, so I'm like, no, I have to go there. I have to go to the panels that she's at. But lo and behold, Mindy McGinnis was at that first panel that Kay Ancrum was going to be at. So I went, and Mindy McGinnis was so unhinged, honest, and so authentic. Immediately I fell in love. Immediately I fell in love, and I said, no, I have to get some Mindy McGinnis books. So I left that book festival with The Female of the Species and The Initial Insult, both signed by her, and subscribing to her newsletter. And I literally, when I went up to the table, I was like, listen, I've never read a single word of yours, but I saw you at that panel and I immediately knew I had to pick up your work immediately. So I am so looking forward to reading these. And truly, the rest is history, because at the festival itself, I started reading The Female of the Species. And just with the first little intro, that turns out this content happens later in the novel, but it's like, just this page alone, I was hooked. I was hooked, and I knew I was gonna be irrevocably changed from my reading experience, because the writing style was right up my alley. So being 7 novels deep into the work of Mindy McGinnis, I would definitely say that The Female of the Species is her best work. Undoubtedly, it's worth 5 stars, and I think it has the broadest appeal to different reading audiences. I think this is primarily the case because the premise inherently, I feel, has the most interest to most audiences, because we follow a teenage girl who goes after men that commit heinous crimes and acts against women. And she's like, no, I'm gonna eliminate them. And the thing that enriched the story even further, it's that it's not even just her point of view. We get her point of view and the point of view, if I'm not mistaken, of at least 2 more characters. And each character was so flawed and complex and fascinating that even though I had to take a lot of breaks while I was reading this, I was fully riveted, invested, immediately in love. And this novel also perfectly exemplifies what is my favorite thing about Mindy McGinnis's writing, which is the complex, messy, far from perfect teenage characters she writes. This is especially the case with her female characters. I adore how Mindy McGinnis writes female characters, because for the most part, it's like, you're not supposed to like them. You're not supposed to like, I feel like, most of her characters, but you still find yourself deeply attached to their narratives, their experiences, what's going on in their lives. And I think that's so powerful and exemplifies so clearly what is so masterful about her writing. Because I don't feel like all authors can get away with writing these types of characters, especially in YA, but in general, that are so messy, but in some ways you still find yourself rooting for them. Immaculate work. But if I have to go into my personal favorites, it absolutely has to be the duology of The Initial Insult and The Last Laugh. This is the deranged energy I want. This is the chaos I crave in my fiction. It was, I don't even know if I can put it to words. Like, first of all, I'm an Edgar Allan Poe girly, so already I was the target demographic for this because there are a lot of references to Edgar Allan Poe's work here, not just the Cask of Amontillado, because the overall premise is more rooted in that short story because we have a main character who feels she has been slighted by this childhood friend that she has. And so she decides, you know what I'm gonna do? Put her behind a wall, trap her in a basement. And she does. Deranged. That premise alone, deranged. But it's not the only short story that Mindy McGinnis takes inspiration from between both novels. But as an avid Edgar Allan Poe reader and lover, this was like a perfect 3-course meal for me. I'm like, delectable, incredible. The things teenagers do in the span of these 2 novels boggles the mind, but I was fully there for it. I had to recount it to 3 of my friends because so many out-of-pocket things kept happening. The tension kept going up, and again, deranged things the characters were doing to each other kept escalating. And I'm like, I cannot keep this to myself. This information cannot stay with me. It must be shared with the populace. Despite the fact that I told them, I recounted the events of both novels to them in its entirety because I knew they weren't going to read it. I'm like, this is not for you. You're not the target audience, but I need you to see the guts that Mindy McGinnis has, the guts that she has to put this content in YA novels, because I still can't fully believe it. Like, sure, I can see some of the restraint because I can see some of the restraint that happened, some of the things that were pulled back, but these are still gory, violent, and again, the harmful things that characters do to each other, the things that happen, it is so much, but I love it with every fiber of my soul. Like, if we're talking about the favorites in my heart and soul, it's right here. It's right here. Amazing. Now, from there, we go into the first novel by Mindy McGinnis that first made me fear in my heart, the love I felt, that first made me go, oh boy, I'm not feeling as strongly about this one as I felt about The Female of the Species and The Initial Insult. What am I gonna do? So in Under This Red Rock, we follow our main character who suffers from auditory hallucinations. And she discovers that these hallucinations only leave her alone when she goes into these caverns near her house, I guess, arguably. And so she ends up getting a summer job there so she can spend more time in the silence of not having all these voices interfering with her life, frankly. And this one is a lot slower going. The buildup is slower. And I personally feel like one of the things that is mentioned in the summary absolutely annihilates the tension in the novel, and I still feel a little bit salty that it's even mentioned, which is part of why I'm not saying it right now, because it happens like halfway through the novel. It takes so long to happen that I'm like, why do we have this in the summary? Why are we promoting this book with that premise when that, incident takes so long to come to pass? I feel like it would have been a lot creepier if we didn't know what's about to happen in these caves and to who specifically. So that was part of what affected my reading experience. And so it took me a second. It took me a second to really get into it. But by the end, she wrapped up everything so incredibly well that I ended up being a huge fan of this novel. I was like, oh, this is also another banger from Mindy McGinnis. And this is where I ended up coming with my phrase of, or I'm pretty sure it was there that I ended up coming with my little phrase of, in Mindy McGinnis we trust. In Mindy McGinnis we trust. We have to have faith. We have to trust the process. Give it time, because she's gonna work it out. She has a vision. I have to trust the vision. 100% that was clear in this one. Then we have Be Not Far From Me. This one came as an absolute surprise for me because I don't tend to read this type of novel. This novel is, I'm pretty sure it's called like a survivalist novel, because it's about this girl who goes hiking in the Smokies with her friends, and then something happens, she gets pissed off, she runs off, gets injured, and so then she's stuck in the Smokies trying to find a way out and survive. And so again, it's not long, so like that helped it, and that helped keep the tension and intrigue. But this is actually what I would argue is the perfect example of how amazing Mindy McGinnis is at character work, because truly the majority of this novel, we're just with this girl in the freaking Smokies as she's in the trenches fighting for her life. And I was riveted. I was hooked. I was so engaged by everything that was going on. Of course, part of what helped is that we do have like flashbacks into the past, because she's spending so much time by herself that she starts questioning and thinking about her relationships and the relationships in her life. So with her father, with her friends, with this guy that she had a crush on, and all of it is executed so perfectly. It was a huge surprise, because I am not into this type of novel. I don't necessarily hate it, like this subgenre. I don't gravitate towards it. Okay, so I actually forgot this other part of my lore drop. So I ended up going to another Mindy McGinnis event, which at this point, I'm pretty sure I had read The Female to Species, The Initial Insult, The Last Laugh, and maybe I had read Under This Red Rock. I believe I had. And I had still on my TBR, because immediately upon finishing The Female to Species and The Initial Insult, I ended up making an order so that I could get a physical copy of The Last Laugh and Under This Red Rock and A Long Stretch of Bad Days. I ended up being able to go to another author event of hers because, unfortunately, her dog needed several surgeries because he got injured, and so she decided to do an impromptu tour to get, some funds flowing. And so she had books there for purchase. So I went there with no intent at the time to get books, but I ended up grabbing there Be Not Far From Me, because so many of the people there really had enjoyed this one. So I was like, I need to get it. But then I also grabbed This Darkness Mine, because the way she talked about it, I'm like, oh, that sounds right up my alley. I need to read that. And I picked up Heroine, because this one I had already been contemplating. And so I ended up with 3 books. So that's how I ended up leaving that event with 6 books signed by Mindy McGinnis, when I had already had 2 of them previously signed. Again, when I tell you I went fully deranged, for Mindy McGinnis. I seriously did. And like, I haven't mentioned this one and I didn't hold it up originally because this one's still on my TBR. I still need to get around reading This Darkness Mind and this, and what's the other one called? Something About Madness. Definitely interested in reading that one as well. So I'll get to it. Anyway, that absolute tangent aside, the other book I ended up picking up by Mindy McGinnis was A Long Stretch of Bad Days. And still to this day so far, this is the most mid read I've had from Mindy McGinnis. I mean, to be fair, it was bound to happen. We can't love every single thing by an author. It's only natural. They explore different things. But this one ended up being the biggest disappointment because I feel like it had so much potential. So the premise of this one is that we're following two high school girls who end up working together on a podcast about their small town because they both unfortunately end up needing a history credit in order to graduate high school. And so they team up to talk about what is called the long stretch of bad days in their small town, which is a span of, I believe it was like 7 days or so, where several unfortunate things happened in this small town. And throughout that process, they're trying to figure out what happened with this missing girl. And so inherently, all of that sounds incredible, amazing, but this was lacking so much tension. And with what I've been able to experience of Mindy McGinnis, like how unhinged things can get, I feel like this one was so absolutely tame. It felt so incredibly tame. Like both our main characters had the potential and the ability to be in a more deranged novel, but they ended up stuck in this one with a more meandering plot that wasn't as engaging, wasn't as riveting. And so it felt very much like, why did you do this to these characters? They are fascinating enough to have a lot more going on and a lot more force behind what's driving the plot. And I feel like ultimately that's what ended up being the shortcomings of here. Like, I still had what I loved about Mindy McGinnis, which is her incredibly compelling characters, but there wasn't enough meat on the bones when it came to the plot in order to drive this forward in a more interesting way. And then finally we have Heroine, which is a novel that does make me think and accept the fact that when I went to that second Mindy McGinnis event and I told her that at that point I've read 3 or 4 novels of hers, again, since July, and that event was August, September, something like that. And she looked at me and she's like, "Are you okay?" I was, which is part of what I said. I'm like, I mean, and that's part of what I was thinking. I'm like, no, the reason I can, in fact, digest all of these novels is because I'm actually strong up here right now. Otherwise, I'd be in the trenches and I wouldn't be able to handle it. And this one kind of finally defeated me. It was November. I was already in the trenches because I had a lot of stuff going on personally. It was not a good month. It was not a good month for me. And of course, naturally, I said, let me pick up the book by Mindy McGinnis where she's talking about the opioid crisis. Because that makes perfect sense. And so this is one of her chunkier novels. It's 408 pages. And you felt that. You felt that because ultimately the whole focus of this novel is about this girl and how she ends up being addicted to opioids because she has a really bad car accident and she's recovering from some serious surgery that she had to have. So she's a softball player, absolutely loves it. Like, that's her passion. And so we follow her as she slowly spirals deeper and deeper into addiction while still trying to pursue her passion of softball and be there for her team. And it's just soul crushing. It's soul crushing. By the end, I was reading it as quickly as possible only because I was so sad. I wanted it to be over. I'm like, this is incredible, though. To be fair, I think it's longer than it needed to be for a novel that ultimately is so, again, interior, and focused on the, inner challenges that our main character is having. We didn't need 400 pages of it. But regardless of that, I was like, I want to escape. I'm like, Mindy, you're doing an excellent job, tremendous job, in fact, but I feel desolate. I need this to be over. So I ended up pushing through the end because I was like, okay, that was heavy. That was a lot. And you're incredible, Mindy, but that's why it ended up being the last book of hers that I read in 2024, because even though there was the whole of December before me, I was like, I think I need space now. I think I've reached the point that I need a breather. I need a moment to recuperate. But I do think I shall be picking up This Darkness Mine very, very soon, because I miss being in the worlds, in the stories that Mindy McGinnis creates. So what exactly was the purpose of this video? Unclear. I don't know. I guess to say I love Mindy McGinnis and you should definitely give her works a try if you haven't already, because I have absolutely no regrets. And as you can see, I was completely consumed by her work. So I suggested if you're looking for another author to just capture you with their work,